You can change your life at any point in time. However, with the new year coming up, 2024, let's talk about how you can reset your life going forward. Keeping everything simple, let's dive right in. Welcome back to the Keeping Everything Simple podcast. I'm your host and fellow learner, Michael Klucas. And on this show, we boil down complex topics into simple, actionable tips. So let's start off with the first segment of the show, the setup. So I obviously am thinking about the new year and what that means for all of us as we think about what happens every single year, our New Year's resolutions. Whether you take part in them or not, it's a big cultural thing that we do here in the US. And I imagine other parts of the world too, as they welcome in the new year, there's the idea of they want to make big changes. They want to have something different occur within this next year of their life. And that is awesome. However, the question comes in, how effective are New Year's resolutions really? How effective are we at truly resetting our lives to be more happy, to be more productive, to be more healthy, to be more successful? And that's a thought that this article by the BBC tackles. So, are New Year's resolutions pointless? It was written February 24th, 2022, but it goes into this idea that January 1st may seem like an arbitrary date. I'm reading this from the article itself. If you're listening to us on a podcast app as opposed to watching us on YouTube, which I recommend that you subscribe to us on YouTube. January 1st may seem like an arbitrary date to start self-improvement, but there are good psychological reasons for doing so. And this is where I was introduced to the idea of the fresh start effect. And this is a very real phenomenon, and it can make our goals more effective at being reached. And so, as the BBC article explains, we craft narratives in our brains, and big seasonal changes actually help split these up into chapters that feel more sustainable and feel more attainable for us as well. So, going through the article, as the author kind of sets up the intro, they're talking about how in 2021, they had mostly kept to their fitness goal of doing one 20-minute HIIT workout every single day, but then they failed pretty miserably at quitting social media. And something that they go into is that a large portion of good intentions end in disappointment, especially in regards to New Year's resolutions, but they don't want to feel like a doom and gloom situation that, oh, because we set them, gear yourself up for disappointment. No. It's instead talking about expectations and realities and how you're going to truly address them. So this is where they introduce then the fresh start effect. So recent psychological research suggests, however, that there are many good reasons to begin a new regime on the first day of a new year. And by understanding and capitalizing on those mechanisms, we can all increase our chances of sticking to our goals in 2022. And this is where they finally launch into what the fresh start effect is. And so they give a little bit of background and talk about Mark Twain and the Roman Stoics, for example. But they give an example of one of Mark Twain's letters from 1960s. And he talks about how yesterday everybody smoked his last cigarette, took his last drink, and swore his last oath. And he wrote that on January 1st, 1963. And then today, we are a pious and exemplary community. 30 days from now, we shall have cast our reformation to the winds and gone to cutting our ancient shortcomings considerably shorter than ever. We shall also reflect pleasantly upon how we did the same old thing last year about this time too. They're going from Anna Schaffner, so a cultural historian and the author of The Art of Self-Improvement. She talks about how after the holiday seasons, you may have overindulged and now it's time to purify. And it's notable, she says, that many resolutions are focused on abstinence, giving up something to cleanse our bodies and souls, which sounds a little funny, not gonna lie. But it's this idea that if we are trying to give things up, it's much harder to give things up than it is to add things in. That's something that is discovered by the article as well. And so with trying to take advantage of this fresh start effect. So your new chapters give you fresh start foundations to go from and to build from. And that is, it's a new day, it's a new season, it's a new opportunity. And that's a mindset you have to kind of maintain in trying to reset your life and to move forward into this next chapter of your life with good intention and good action behind it. And so that's why you want to get clear on the why behind your goal. So I've said it before, and I'll say it again, is that if you aren't clear, you'll likely miss the target. And we now better understand the power of why. Thank you, Simon Sinek, for that. And we understand why SMART goals are kind of touted as this easiest, most optimal way to really start getting into goals, because it is something that is simple, it's measurable, it's attainable. Well, actually, let me pull it up here before I start rambling, because I tend to remember it off the bat, but SMART goal acronym. Let me just type that out here. So yeah, SMART goals are specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And that tends to be touted as like the simplest way to get started. And the problem here is that we need some internal motivator to help us reset and stick to our goals. And if you aren't making your goals based off of that internal motivator, you're going to have a much harder time sticking to them and making it happen. And so my practice for you right now is write out the goal you want to complete, as many of them as possible. So pause this episode, pause this video, take out a pen and paper, and write out as many of them as you can. And then clump them together into categories. And then from there, once you have your categories, you have your huge list of goals, shave them down into 3 to 5 main primary goals. You want to make it specific and achievable, but you don't want it to be so overwhelming that like, I will never accomplish this whole list of paper. That's why you want to shave it down as much as possible into specific. Once you have written them down, once you have narrowed it down to those 3 to 5, get really specific on the why behind those primary goals that you have selected and why they're so important to you, because it's all about the internal motivators that will help you reach them in the end. Now, continuing through the article from BBC, they go over the fact that those chapters of our lives, such as arriving at university, getting married, the birth of your first child, your mind can split those major chapters into smaller sections so that like the start of a new year represents a break in the narrative, or whenever you break the narrative, it is allowing you a chance to, again, reset and look at a new opportunity to say, okay, cool, there is something new coming on the horizon. I can take advantage of this and make something happen. And this helps you create a psychological distance from past failures by allowing you to see mistakes as like the old you, according to the article right here, and that now you do better. And so it's really imperative that we are embracing the whole shifts that occur naturally within our life, but then also it's very powerful to use the big events, these big holiday seasons as well, whether it's like the new year, whether it is the first day of spring, whether it is the fall solstice or autumn equinox, or whatever it is. Finding ways of having those distinct cutoff points will make it easier to keep the goals moving forward, or reevaluating, reassessing, and then getting back on track. And that leads us then into the how being as equally important as the why behind your goals. And so any goal that you might have, any change you might create, you can only make it happen if you actively do the work and you put in the intentional effort behind it. And in an article by Psychology Today, it talks about how the fact is that indeed many, if not most, goals are never actually put into practice. And why should they be? Goals come from the more rational, long-term oriented part of your brain. And this is why that how becomes so important, because if you are rationally and logically thinking about your goals, you want to be able to say, okay, I know the why behind them, my internal motivator, and that's the why I'll stick to it. Now it's how. How am I going to make it happen? What are the steps I'm going to take? And if you start something new, you need to figure out the how. If something you experienced before, it's how you're going to get back on track. It does however, need to be easy to follow up and start from a strong foundation. And so I'm going to use like an example of a gym here. It's like you start with the basics. You start with your basics of your form. Then you go into trying out other variations of an exercise and still focusing on the form. And then you start to learn different variations of how to reach failure in your workouts to grow muscle. Or maybe that's not your goal and you try to figure out how can I maintain steady state cardio to help my heart health. Whatever your goal is, you're starting to learn different foundational pieces that help you elevate from there, but it all goes back to the foundation, because if you have a shaky foundation, you're more prone to injury, you're more at risk of not getting the results that you want, and you're more at risk of just essentially wasting time by putting yourself in a position to not optimally reach your goals. And then that brings us to the next practice I have for you guys. So for those 3 to 5 goals that you have written out, so I want you to list out your first 3 steps. This is, again, making small progress with simple steps here, is that if it's something that you know about, great. Then you can write your first 3 steps and how you're going to start again and stay consistent. And then if it's something that you don't know about, then it is as simple as looking up a couple videos, but not letting yourself get too caught up in learning, because for a lot of us, if we are trying something new, pursuing a new goal, it may be exciting to say, all right, cool, I'm learning so much about this new thing. I am motivated. I think I can do it. But you never stop learning and you only watch videos, you only read books, and you don't implement it, then that's putting you at risk of just falling into this infinite learning cycle without ever using the knowledge that you've accumulated. So watch a couple of videos if you're starting something new, but write down 3 actionable steps that you're going to take in pursuing this next goal, because you want to know your how. You want to know how you're going to make it happen, as opposed to just, oh, I think I can do it like this, or like this, or like this. No, keep it simple. Watch a couple videos, and from there, take action. Make your 3-step plan. Another example for this is, again, working out. It's not going to be, all right, I'm going to start my steroids and I'm going to get all these supplements and I'm going to completely overhaul my diet. If you've never worked out before, no, keep it simple. Start with push-ups, sit-ups, and squats. 10 a day. That's it. That's how you'd want to start. You want to start by making it attainable. You have your how, like, hey, I want to get healthier. I want to maybe shed a couple pounds. Like, I'm engaged. I'm getting married next year. I want to lose a couple pounds for my wedding. That's part of my motivator. But internal motivator is, hey, I want to look good, feel good, and be confident. And this is a way in which I can do that. So I'm going to focus on my health and my physical health. But for someone starting out that's maybe not been very active in their life, it's keeping it simple, because you don't want to overcomplicate it and make yourself feel overwhelmed and make it not something that is enjoyable that you can attain over time. So if you're following along with the practice steps so far, comment down below if you're watching this on YouTube, what has been your favorite goal so far, and what are the 3 steps that you'll be taking to make sure that you actually reach them. So this brings us into the second segment of the show, conflict and conversation here. I'm not saying that resetting your life is going to be easy. In fact, it actually can be one of the hardest things you can do. However, the actual fact that you can start is as simple as truly just writing those 3 steps down and actually taking action with them. I'm going to emphasize that a lot. But going back to the article by BBC here, it's like for many skeptics, they wonder if it's worthwhile to do. But then in a recent study by YouGov, 35% of people who made resolutions managed to stick to all their goals, and 50% of people managed to keep some of their resolutions. And that's a lot of people that are making some positive changes to their lives, even if they fail to meet some of their goals. And this is why I emphasize the importance, like the overall importance of making it simple, making it fun, making it attainable, because you don't want to let yourself get overwhelmed. But that's why it's not always easy, but the progress you can make is undeniable if you are being mindful and intentional about what you do. And one of the ways in which you can help this practice is get an accountability partner. So we often give the person who we think will be tomorrow superpowers. And this again goes into the psychology of today's article. Our goals come from the rational, long-term oriented side of our brain. I want to emphasize that. The problem is the more impulsive, short-term oriented part of our brain is the one that sustains your habits and takes over most of your day-to-day actions. We're great at automizing, I don't know how to pronounce that, automizing behavior and freeing resources for other things, but then those automatic behaviors conflict with your long-term goals and you struggle. So get yourself an accountability partner. Someone who is going to want the same goals as you or goal very similar to you, and someone that isn't being given quote unquote superpowers, because we're not relying on the us of tomorrow and our motivation of tomorrow when they are someone that's helping us out today. Because if we're not careful, then if we're only relying on who we think will be tomorrow, we can be making promises that we expect them to keep, but we're not going to change overnight. So we have to be careful about that. And that's where the accountability partner comes in, because they can help minimize that risk by being someone that's like, all right, I'm working on towards this goal with this person and we can make it happen, but we have to keep each other accountable and motivate each other. So it's not just us relying on our own factors of motivation, which can work for some people, but it's so much more helpful to have a partner. And I want to emphasize that change isn't linear. And that's why there's been, for both the articles that we have gone over so far, so Psychology Today, BBC, for both of them, they go over the fact that, hey, we're not going to always hit all of our goals, and that's okay. Change is not going to be just one straight line up, like, all right, I'm going to make it happen. I'm on track to hit all my goals. That's not how it works. Instead, it focuses on the idea that we can't expect a night and day difference if we just do X, Y, Z. However, if we continue to stick to the process and trust our process because it's led by internal factors and a simple 3-step action plan, we will make progress even if we go up and down a little bit along the way. It's kind of like the stock market, essentially, where it should be going up and down in the short term, but in the long term, going up and to the right, showing a positive trend in the right direction. And so, like, my own goal for weight loss, as I mentioned earlier, like, I'll get stuck in plateau for a week or 3, depending, and get stuck there before making progress again. And that is perfectly okay. And so the practice here that I want you guys to do right now with that sheet of paper that you started at the beginning of this episode, you started that piece of paper, right? Is write out 1 or 2 people who could be good accountability partners for you. And also give yourself a quick promise that it's either written down or it's in the steps that if you miss a day or 2, you simply will get back on track. You'll pick up and keep going. You won't get so down on yourself because you missed a day or 2, but you'll instead make a promise to get back on track by following the simple 3 steps. Simplest, easiest way to get started again. And the final big piece of conflict here is that we have this idea of stretch goals as well, where we're trying to really make something unattainable attainable, which in of itself can sometimes work out. Like, it can sometimes push you to actually reach it, or you're going to fall short. And this is where that kind of 35-50% from the BBC article mentioned, where it's like, hey, 35% of people met most of the goal, 50% met some of the goal, but it was still a positive trend in the right direction. And this is where stretch goals come in here, because you want to make something that is attainable. You don't want to be so far out there that it feels actually discouraging to you in the long run. So you have to be careful about that. But this is where we grow if we push ourselves. We have to be very self-aware if we're going to have a stretch goal, because we don't want to end up in this negative feedback loop for ourselves. Like, oh, I never hit this goal. It's not worth it. It could just be that your time horizon isn't on the right frame of mind. Like, you have to be able to think long term for it's like, okay, maybe this goal isn't something that's going to happen in 1 year. It might happen in 3 years. It might happen in 5 years, and that's okay. But you got to keep these stretch goals in mind and be self-aware about them. And we have to play the game of sustainability here, because it's not the idea of following crash diets or these get-rich-quick schemes. You have to be sustainable in your approach, so that way you know that you actually will hit that goal. It may not be on the time that you originally thought, but you at least have a process to follow through with. And you might hit it, you might not. But it's all about the positive trend in the right direction, which is to the right and up. that brings us to the next segment of the show, the transformations. So the piece of the puzzle here is you've gone over your why, your how, and your who, because you have someone who's going to be an accountability partner for you. Now let's talk about when. This relates into what I was just talking about. It's all about sustainability, where this is taking something from the SMART goals and making it timely because it's at least paired with a certain date or a certain session or season of your life. And the practice I want you guys to do here is give your goals a due date if it makes sense to do that, or give it a target date for the future if it's a longer term goal and a future oriented goal. And then pick check-in points, because you want to have points in which you can say, okay, I'm going to check in with myself on the first Saturday of every single month because I'll have time to sit down and review my goals and review my progress. Or if it's something that you have experience with in the past and you feel comfortable with, it's like, all right, maybe I'll check on the first day of every other month. So that way I'm checking in 6 times a year with my goals in the long run. But pick a day in which you will set aside time to check in with yourself and check in with your goals and your progress. And so reviewing what ultimately works best, I'm going to pull up a Google Doc here again as I did last week. And this is me expertly writing everything out here because I can. So use the fresh start effect. That is first and foremost something that you should be working on and doing, is setting points in time that is going to reset your mind, reset your brain to let you know it's like, all right, that was the me of quarter 1. Now the me of quarter 2 of this year is going to do XYZ and build upon those first 3 steps that I made originally. And now I'm going to have steps 4, 5, 6. And I'm going to keep leveling up and elevating myself as I go. But you want to use that fresh start effect to your advantage, so that way you can truly make that happen. And then from there, use check-ins. I can type, obviously. Use check-ins, because if you go 4 months and you don't check in with yourself and you realize, oh, I'm actually super far off target here, that's going to be much harder to get back on track than it is to say, all right, cool. From January to February, I've done this. February to March, I will do this, or I plan to do this, to make sure that I'm still making progress. You have to make sure that you are making these check-in points viable for you and also effective by having an idea of what you want to check when you get there. Not just, oh, what's my progress? It's, all right, what part of this process have I been doing well and what can I improve upon to keep moving forward? And then you want to have the support of an accountability partner. So this will help you avoid giving your future self superpowers, and instead will help be realistic and grounded in reality of what you can do. So having an accountability partner will make sure that extra motivation comes, but also it's not just you trying to consistently motivate yourself. And that's why it's going to be so important and why it's on the list of things that you're going to need to be successful in reaching your goals and resetting your life for 2024. Oh, I never wrote down partner. So, there we go. If you're watching on YouTube, you didn't see that. Support of an accountability partner. And then the next 2 pieces here is that you will have set a target date. Think more long-term on these, obviously, because again, if our goals come from the rational, long-term oriented part of our brain, it's going to be much easier if we are setting a longer timeline for us to meet, even if we may have ups and downs along the way. But the most important piece here is that we get okay with adjusting goals. Now, we may realize that the outcome that we're looking for is actually not what we had originally started with at the start of the year. And that's okay, because if you're using the fresh start effect, if you're using check-ins, if you are using an accountability partner and you have a target date or a target date, you may realize in time that, oh, I actually wanted a different result for a different reason. I'm going to update my goal to more properly reflect what I'm aiming for and why I want it, because you shouldn't feel like you are trapped in only going after what you started with at the beginning of the year. Like, there's been points where the past couple of years, I have altered my goals halfway through the year because I'm like, I made good progress so far, but I need to adjust this a little bit more to make it a bit more accurate with who I want to be in the future and not just an aesthetic that I want type of thing. So be okay with making adjustments within your check-ins because you are going to evolve as you reset your life, as you reach your goals, and your goals will naturally evolve with you. So be okay with that. And I hope you guys have been following along with those practices because I know that change can be scary. We like when things are predictable. We like when there is a bit more of a sense of security in our lives. And that's what makes change so hard for a lot of us. But you don't want to be overwhelmed by these large goals that you have because you want to make sure that it is for the right reasons that you're setting them overall and that you know you want them for the right reasons. So if you're keeping everything simple, you can break them down into the basics, you can stay accountable, you can look at your target date, and you can create true change in your life by making it simple and by making one simple step at a time and allowing yourself that room to adjust and to grow. So in your comment below, make sure you also add in your timeline and when you plan to check in. And I would recommend that you come back to this episode to check in with your goals and your progress to see how far you've come, what progress or what changes you need to make to them. Because the main thing here is that if we are trying to make change and make change stick, we have to sometimes take a larger step towards making it public or keeping ourselves accountable. So comment down below so you can come back and check in with yourself and check in with the community. So that way we can see where we've come from and just how far we've gone and how far we all are going to go in 2024. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure that you also leave us a like and subscribe to our podcast episode while you are down there commenting. If you listen to us on a podcast app, make sure you leave us a rating. It helps us out so much and helps other people discover the show so we can help more people just like you. Keeping everything simple. Have an amazing day, you amazing people, and I will see you all in the next episode. Go out there and do great things.